All right, on today's episode of Python Papi, we're back inside our TensorFlow course, and we're still doing our malaria custom layers module. Let's have a look at what we went over today. Now, yesterday we started the process of building our own custom layer as opposed to using one that is pre-built. So we're going to pick up where we left off. I believe the last thing we talked about was super functions. We didn't get not just super functions, but passing parameters into our super function, and we didn't get too much more into building the actual layer today. We just went over more concepts. So let's do some light reading. So then we have our init that gets attached. I think we did that yesterday also, the init. Let me see. Yeah. So we also need to specify the number of output units first. If that's said, we have to take that into consideration when building our neural and dense layer. So inside of our define init, we'll pass in output units as a parameter. Then we will define self.output units, which are equal to output units. From this point on, we will be building our layer. In order to build this layer, we have to take into consideration this definition. See lines 125 to 133. So we have to take this into consideration here, this model, or we call it a definition when we're actually building our layer. So we have to keep that in consideration. And I was explaining yesterday that was the X input into the MX, or M times X plus C, or the weight times X plus B. It's the same thing, but just more specified with this one. It's the weights times X plus the bias. It's going to give us our output of Y equals MX plus C, or which also can be read, like I said yesterday, was the Y equals weight times X plus the bias, or plus B. All right, but this definition isn't very clear like this. We'll break it up to make it easier to understand. So suppose we have this input of shape batch size of, let's say, number of features, BF. So suppose that is our input. What happens here is this input is going to be multiplied by these weights, WX plus B, which happens to be a matrix. Now we take this BF and multiply by that matrix. And for the multiplication to be valid, we need to ensure that the number of columns we have matches the number of rows in the matrix. But then what are the dimensions of the matrix? We have to note that this matrix has to be defined in such a way that we have a shape of F. This shape of F must match the number of output units. So if we want the number of output units, for example, to be 1, we specify it like this, F1. You see here we have the F, then we have the 1 representing the number of output units. And that's why when defining the dense layer, we need to specify the F in F1, because F is gotten automatically from the number of columns and inputs being F. So this F is defined by this F. This F here in this equation is defined by this F in this equation. And this is our, what do you call it here? This is our bias. So if we don't take F from the number of columns in the input, we will get an error. So it has to come from here, or it's going to throw an error. A TensorFlow automatically takes F from BF and then collects the input we pass into it, the dense layer. So when we specify the dense by passing a number of units, one as we specify for the example, the weights matrix W is automatically defined by the input we pass into the dense as a number of outputs. So whatever number we use as the number of outputs in our dense layer is the number that's going to be passed in as our outputs. And it's going to be used as our weights. So basically the dense layer affects the rows we have. But then what we pass in as an argument here is going to give us the number of columns we're going to have for the matrix. So whatever number we have for our output units is going to be the number of columns we have. And move down a little bit. Now if that's said, we have F by 1, F1, and we're going to multiply that, and then we'll have a B by 1, B1. So now we understand how we got this output. And then we have plus B by 1. So we have B by 1 plus B by 1. Our first B by 1 comes from multiplying B by 1 by F by 1. And second B by 1 comes from the bias. So that's it. Now once we add this up, we have an output of B by 1, and that's our Y. So that's our shape. The shape of our Y is going to be B by 1. This is going to be the shape of our Y, the shape of our output. Now we can move on to building. We'll start by defining the build method, which just takes a parameter of self for now. Next, we will define our weights with self.weights and define our weights. We can do that by making self.weights equal to the self.addWeights method. Let me show you that really quickly. This is the only other piece we added to the actual layer that we're building. since yesterday. We did the super function here, and then we did self dot output dot units equals output dot units or output units. We did that yesterday. So the only thing we did today additionally was define build. That got an input of self for now. Then we did the self dot weights equals self dot add weights. So yeah, we didn't actually start building the layer yet. We still going over all the concepts we need to understand before we move forward with building the actual layer. Okay, next we specify the shape. We are going to have our number of rows. So in rows, which is going to come from the inputs, and then we are going to have our number of columns, which is going to come from the output units we specified. To that we are going to pass in self outputs. So we get a number of output units. How do we obtain this number of output units? We're not actually going to go over this right now. This is a little later on. We were just asking a question, so we will go over that later on once we pick the unit back up. But this is how the inputs get passed into the self.add weight. We have the in rows here as a parameter, and then we have the self.output. It's supposed to be add outputs. Let me see. Yeah, that's more correct right there. So it's supposed to be self.add output units that gets passed in along with the in rows. No, it's not. It's supposed to be output. Sorry about that. Getting carried away with pushing these buttons. Okay, so that's the proper way right here. We have the self.weights equals self.add weight, in rows as a parameter, and self.output units as a parameter. And that's how far we got so far. Like I said, we're not actually doing too much on building a layer as of yet. We're still going over the concepts we need to understand to actually move forward. But of course, as we move forward, I will keep you guys posted every step of the way. For now, this is the Python Papi. You guys stay Gucci.